This business plan tutorial has been developed by Mayo Northeast SICAP to support back-to-work enterprise allowance or short-term enterprise allowance applicants to complete a comprehensive business plan for their proposed new business as part of their application to Intrio. This tutorial is the copyright of Mayo Northeast SICAP. It is strictly for the use of back-to-work enterprise allowance or short-term enterprise allowance scheme applicants referred to us by Intrio. If you refer to your business plan template, it will comprise of the following sections. At the top of each section on the template, you will see a time reference. This time reference shows where in this tutorial you will find the relevant section. If you are applying for back-to-work enterprise allowance or short-term enterprise allowance, you will need to prepare and complete a business plan. This video will demonstrate how to successfully prepare and complete a business plan for your new proposed business. The first section of the business plan will require you to fill out details about your new business or enterprise. So if you have decided to give the business a name and you have registered your business name with the CRO, the company's registration office, include the business name here. So in this example, the business name is Treat Your Guests and the owner of the business is John Smith. If you have decided not to register a business name, under enterprise name, just include your own name here, John Smith. Then you need to, if you have a business address, you can include your business address here. If not, include your home address. You will then need to include your contact telephone number and your contact email address for correspondence. You are then required to select which legal structure you propose for your business. So the three legal structures are sole trader, a partnership, or a limited company. If you decide to trade as a sole trader, you're effectively electing to become self-employed and you don't have a business partner. You're also going to be personally responsible for the business as a sole trader. Your main legal obligation will be to prepare accounts and file an annual income tax return with revenue, and whatever profit you declare on your income tax return, this will attract taxes, tax, PRSI and USC, which you will be responsible to pay to revenue. Setting up a sole trader is relatively simple, and just bear in mind that your personal assets could be used to pay off creditors in the event of your business failing, but just also bear in mind that you have full control over your business and all your business activities. The next legal structure would be a partnership. So this is if there's two or more individuals joining together to create a business. If this is the case, at the your legal obligation will be to prepare accounts each year and declare the partnership profit with revenue. When you incorporate or you create a partnership, each partner will decide what percentage of the profits of the business they will own. So if you have two partners and they decide to go 50-50, each partner will then be individually responsible for sharing or for filing their share of profits with revenue. So for example, if the partnership made a profit of 50,000, each partner would be responsible for filing an income tax return with revenue and declaring 25,000 of the profit and paying the relevant taxes on that share of the profit, which would be tax, PRSI, and USC. The third legal structure then is the limited company. And if you decide to set up a limited company, yourself as an individual and your business are seen as two separate legal entities. And what this means that if your business gets into debt, that the creditors can only claim on the company assets and they can't go after you personally as an individual. If you decide to go down this route, it is a little bit more, there's a little bit more administration involved. You will have to set up your company with the CRO, the company's registration office, and you will also then have to register with revenue, register the company with revenue, and register for corporation tax. So under the sole trader and the partnership, they will be paying income tax, but as a company, you will be paying corporation tax. Annually, the company will need to file tax returns with revenue and pay their corporation tax, but they will also be obliged to file accounts with the company's registration office, the CRO. If you're undecided of which structure to go for, particularly if you're torn between a sole trader and a limited company, one thing that I can suggest for new businesses is possibly to set up as a sole trader, trade for a 6-month period to a year, and if in that period you decide to convert the business from a sole trader to a limited company, you can do so. However, if you set up as a limited company and then decide that your preference is a sole trader, it's a little bit more complicated. So it's the route, the easier route would be to set up as a sole trader and then progress to a limited company. The next section you're asked for here is a description of your enterprise. So this is just an overview because you will be asked for a more detailed description later on in the form. So for the purpose of this example, the enterprise or business description is the hire of candy carts and Ferris wheels for personal and corporate events. And the final part in this section is your proposed business start date. So there's two options I'm suggesting here. One, you could put in that you're proposing to start your business immediately on approval of your application. So once your application has been approved, you're going to then start trading. Or if you want to give a more specific date, allow a maximum of 3 weeks for the approval process to take place. So include a date from the date of your application at least 3 weeks out. And this can be included as your proposed start date. However, either option will be acceptable. The next section of the business plan is the enterprise service section. So in this section, the first question you need to address is you're asked to give a full description of your proposed business. So it's really important here to give as much information and as much clarity of your proposed business as you possibly can. And bear in mind as well, this is a Word document, so this section can be extended to include as much text as possible. So just to give you some pointers here on the type of information you could include, you can include your business name if you have one, information on what the business does and the value it offers, the location of the business, whether it's going to be local, nationwide, worldwide, online, your origin story, how your business idea originated, what you plan to sell and to whom, and what you want to accomplish in the immediate future. And also any other information that you may feel may be relevant or provide further clarity. The next section here is information about relevant qualifications and experience for your proposed business. Now, the key word here is relevant. It has to be relevant to the business proposal. So as regards the qualifications, for each qualification you may have, provide information on the course name, the provider, where the course took place, the location or whether it was online, the dates, the duration, and the certification achieved. And attach a copy of the certification when submitting the business proposal. As regards experience, give information about the employer, the dates and duration of the job, the role, and also a brief line of the duties and how they are going to be relevant to your proposed business. The section 3 here asks you about future training you may require as a new business owner. So the training is divided into 3 sections: sales and marketing, bookkeeping, and taxation. And just note that Mayo Northeast SICAP and Mayo Local Enterprise Office provides a lot of training in this area. And once you express an interest here for future training, you will be able to attend a course in your area of choice. So the first area here is sales and marketing. This is a really important area because it's really important as a new business owner for the public or your potential customers to be aware of your business and also the products and services you offer. So training in this area will include general advertising and marketing, social media, increasing your presence on social media, and also advertising your products and services across the social media platforms, getting your website up and running, and also making sure, looking at your search engine optimization and increasing traffic to your website. So all of the above areas will be included in sales and marketing training. The next area is bookkeeping. As a new business owner, you will be required to keep proper books of accounts. So you'll be required to record your sales, your purchases, and also make sure you keep all proper relevant documentation to back up your sales and purchasing transactions. And the goal will be at the end of every year, you'll be able to prepare your profit and loss account, and that is what will be submitted to revenue and what you will ultimately be paying your taxes on. The third area here is the area of taxation. So like I've mentioned, once you have your books of accounts prepared for the year and your profit calculate, you then have the option of logging on to revenue and submitting and filing your own income tax return each year. It is also an option for you to hire an accountant or another bookkeeper to do this, but it is important to note that it is something that you can actually do yourself as a business owner. So there are the 3 broad areas of training. If it's something you're interested in, put in here that it's yourself will attend. If it's not yourself, but somebody else will attend on your behalf, you can put in the in here if it's a family member or a friend. The next section here, it's asking you about future ambitions for your proposed business. So where do you see your business in the future? Okay, or what's your future plans for the business? So once again, just some pointers here that you may include. Your vision may be to increase your income and your overall profitability, to launch new products and services. So you might want to start small with one or two and then increase it. Expand your business network. So get to know as many other business owners and increase your business contacts out there. And that might be another ambition. Develop new or more skills. Enter new markets. Expand the size of your business, like increase it by employing staff. Increase your online presence, or introducing a customer loyalty program, or any other valid point or ambition you may have for your future business, you can include here. The next section asks, is there any compliance with statutory requirements required for your business plan? So do you require membership of an organization, of any professional body, or have to have any special qualifications to commence your new business? If the answer to this is yes, list what the requirements are and whether you have them or not at this stage. And if you don't have them, what's your plans about acquiring them? 6 then is to do here with business registration. So are you registered with revenue as self-employed? So as a potentially new business owner, you must register with revenue to let revenue know that you're about to become self-employed. There are videos available that you can refer to on the income tax registration process, which can be carried out under your My Account profile. And it is a good idea to watch those video before you carry out the registration process. So are you registered? So if the answer is yes, it's a little hard to get the X in the box there. So I'm just putting my cursor in there and I'm just putting an X there beside the cursor. I'm just moving that on. So I've just clicked and moved the box on there. So there's yes. Next question is, do you have a valid tax clearance certificate? So a tax clearance certificate is proof given by revenue that all relevant taxes are up to date by an individual or a business owner. So at this stage, you are not expected to have a tax clearance certificate. So it's actually okay to just put an X in here and say no, that you don't have it. Okay, so I'm just moving that over. And then if you're going to be, you've already registered for income tax, you put in the date of your tax registration in here and the income tax number. So once the registration of income tax process is complete, you should receive a letter from Revenue stating the date of your registration and your registration number, and include that information there. So the type of registration, will be self-employed registration. And at this stage, it is unlikely that any new business owner will be VAT registered or employer registered, but this will be something you can do down the line should the need arise. And if you need to register for VAT or register as an employer in the future, you will log on to your Ross profile and complete the registration there. So the final question in this section is asking you if you have an accountant. So it is not compulsory to have an accountant as a business owner, particularly if you're a sole trader or a partnership. So if it's a case that you don't have an accountant and you're going to do the books yourself, or you have a family member or friend who's going to do them for you and file your taxes, just say no. Or if it's a case that you do happen to have an accountant, just put in their name and their contact details there in that section. The next section of the form is the management section. So the first question in this section asks for the reasons for setting up your business. So I have just included a couple of pointers here. So some of the reasons might be to have financial independence, to solve a problem and do it better than anyone else, to pursue your passion and purpose, to have a flexible work schedule, to give something back to the community and make an impact, or to tap into your creative skills, or any other reason. So it can be all of the above plus some more, or whichever ones are relevant to yourself. The next section here is asking who will perform the day-to-day office, bookkeeping, and sales tasks in your business. So it's not unusual for a startup business, especially in the infancy stages, for the owners to look after all or most of these tasks themselves. But it's just something you need to think about before you embark on your business, is what tasks need to be completed and how often and when are you going to complete them. So the first one is the bookkeeping tasks. So this is keeping a record of your day-to-day bookkeeping transactions, recording all your sales, recording all your expenses, keeping track of your bank account and your cash flow. And whoever is going to do this in your business, so in this example, I've put in self, and then how often you plan to do it. So bookkeeping should be done at least weekly, just to make sure you're keeping on track of all your transactions. The next task is office duties. So this would be things like answering the phone, taking inquiries, making appointments, scheduling customer visits, anything of that nature. It comes under the umbrella of office duties. So office duties will need to be completed daily. And once again, who do you plan to do this? And I've just put down self in this example. The next task is tax returns. So when your bookkeeping is complete for the year, you will prepare your profit and loss, and this will form the basis of your tax return. So as a self-employed person, you are obliged to file your income taxes with revenue on an annual basis. And it is in October annually, the deadline for filing income taxes. So this can be done by yourself, or it can be done by an accountant. And the next task then is the task of selling. Who's going to look after your sales? Who's going to promote your business? Who's going to fulfill orders? Who's going to deal with customer inquiries? The whole area of selling. So once again, I've put in self here. So this is something that's done weekly and probably actually daily as well, if you're answering phones and taking in sales inquiries. The third section under this area is the whole area of receiving payment for your goods and services. How are you going to make it as easy as possible for your customer to pay you? Because it's really vital for a business that you are getting paid by your customers in a timely manner. Because if you're not getting paid, you're not going to be able to pay your suppliers or even draw any money out of the business for your own personal use. So just a couple of pointers here. They may not all be relevant to your particular business, but it's just to make you think a little bit about it. So one of the first methods of payment is, are you providing a service or goods and you're getting paid immediately, cash on delivery? If this is a case that you're expecting cash on delivery, notify your customers in advance. So if anybody is coming to your business, availing of your goods and services, that they know these are your terms and conditions. If you are literally only accepting cash as a form of payment, that also needs to be communicated to customers in advance. Another thing you may do to ensure payment is to set up a business Revolut account or a PayPal account in order that your customers can pay you for your goods and services. You may decide to accept debit or credit cards as a form of payment, and you may need to look into some sort of software or an app to help you with this. And one that springs to mind is SumUp. You may have an online booking service. So an example of an online booking service is Booksy, and that would have been explained to you in the Start Your Own Business course. If you have a booking online service, do you take a deposit or do you take full payment in advance? And if it's a case that you do take a deposit and the balance is paid on receipt of service. So all that area needs to be explored and decided by yourself if you are offering a booking online service, what your terms and conditions are going to be and how you're going to ensure payment. Something else to bear in mind, if you're offering a service that involves you purchasing materials, do you ask your customer for a deposit to purchase the materials, or do you ask the customer to purchase the materials directly themselves and you just supply the labor? So all of the above are things you need to think about and get clarity on before you start offering your goods and services. Another thing you need to think about is if you are offering credit. So if you're providing goods or services and you're not getting paid immediately by your customer, you're going to extend them credit where they don't pay you for 30 days. This will involve a little bit more administration. You will need to raise an invoice, and then you will need to follow up and make sure that invoice is paid. So that may involve a follow-up phone call. It may involve you sending out a statement with outstanding invoices to your customers at the end of every month, prompting them to pay. If you're dealing in credit sales, you need to have a very, very good bookkeeping to keep track of it. You may need to consider investing in an accounting software because the accounting software will raise the invoice, allow you to email it to your customer. You can also track your receipts or your payments from your customer. And at the end of every week or every month, you will be able to have a list of customers who still owe you money, and you will need to follow up on that list. And you can follow up by automating a statement and sending it out to them. Another thing to think about if you are offering credit sales is to set up a Stripe link and embed that in your invoice. So when you email an invoice to your customer, also have a link. So on receipt of the invoice, they can tap into the link and they can pay you immediately if they wish. So all of the above examples there need to be explored, and you need to figure out which one fit one or how many of them fit your business. If there are any other methods that you feel you will include or explore, add them all on in that section also. The next section of the business plan covers the whole area of marketing. So the first question you're asked in this section is to provide details of market research you have carried out. So just to clarify, market research involves collecting valuable information about your new business's customers, markets, and competitors. So in this section, you will need to outline what information you have collected and how was it collected. So firstly, just dealing with the information that you have collected during your market research. So examples of some of the information you may have collected could be where you identify your competitors and list your competitors here and the services they offer. Identify markets that you plan to sell in. Identify any new opportunities you have found. List what you have found regarding your price research, and also any information you may have gathered about your potential customers and their spending habits, or any other valuable information you have gathered during the course of your market research. So when you have listed the information you have gathered, then disclose how you came about this information. And you may have got this information by carrying out surveys or questionnaires. You may have carried out some research by means of focus groups and learning from the feedback of your focus groups. You may have just carried out some customer observations. You may have carried out some formal or informal interviews, or you may have just completed some online research. So whatever your methods were in gathering your information, make sure to disclose them here. And plus back it up by any evidence you have by way of attachment. The next section here focuses on the products or services you're going to be offering in your new business and what you're going to be charging. So I have just given here a variety of products and services. There's 12 items here, 12 lines here. You may only have one. If you require more than 12, you can click down here and add more lines. So just a couple of examples. The first one here is gel nails. So if you were setting up a beautician's and gel nails were one of your services, this would be a cost per service. So 40 euros per set, and you would estimate it would take 1 hour to prepare a set of gel nails. The next one is for somebody who's providing a landscaping service. This may be a service that you charge on a daily rate, and 150 per day would be the daily rate. So just the important thing to note is here, these parameters here can be changed to suit your needs. The next one is a floor fitter, a carpenter, and their service is going to be 60 euros per hour. The next two examples are somebody who provides goods. So if it's goods you're providing, you will list all your goods and the cost that you propose to sell at over here. So in this case, we have a pottery. So a 6-mug set of pottery will retail at 90 euro. A pottery lamp will retail at 120 per unit. And the last example I have here is an events business where they hire out candy carts, and they hire out a candy cart fully stocked at 80 euros per rental. So that's just an example of the types of products and services and how you would record them in this section. And remember too that what you record, your pricing in this section, is going to then be important when it comes to filling out the financial section of this form, where you're going to project your income and expenditure for the next year. You'll be referring back to this pricing section. So for example, somebody providing gel nails as a service, they will have to estimate how many sets they propose to complete in a week, then in a year, and multiply that at the cost per set, and that will give their income for the year. The next question asks you, what geographical area will your business cover? So this could be just a local area, it could be a town, it could be a county, and if so, name it. You could be providing your service or you're selling your products nationwide. You could be selling them nationwide plus Europe, nationwide plus UK. You could be selling them worldwide, or you could be selling them online. So whatever is relevant to your particular business, just include it in here in this section. The next question then asks you to focus on your customer base and who your business is aimed at. So a customer base is defined as people who will continually buy your product or use your services. Who are these people and how do you identify them? So some of the factors to identify them is you might be selling your product or services to other business owners. You might be selling it to the public, or you might be selling it to both. Then you need to look at demographics. Is there a particular age group who your product and services aimed at? Is there a gender? Does it relate to marital status? Does it relate to your customer's income, their profession, their job? Does it relate to their interest or hobbies? Does it relate to where they live? Or does it relate to their employment status? And the other thing to consider when establishing your customer base is does your customer base relate to people with problems that need solving? So whatever your customers are, whoever your customers are, list it here and be able to identify who your customers are and what characteristics are common to your customers. The next question here asks how you will advertise or promote your business. How are you going to make customers aware of your products or services? So what you need to do is tick the following advertising methods that you are going to undertake. So it's a little bit difficult to get an X in the box here, but if you just put your cursor here before the box and just put in X here. So for example, flyers might be one, van signage might be another, premises signage might be another, and social media might be another. But whatever way you propose to advertise, tick the boxes here of what is going to be relevant to your business. The next question then ties back into your market research. So it asks you, it focuses on your competitors and the type and size of your competitors. So you will already have established this in your market research. Who are your competitors? So here you need to list your competitors, what they are offering, the prices they're offering, their size, and their location. Question 6 then asks, what outstanding features does your business have to surpass your competitors? So in other words, what unique selling points do your business have? How are you going to compete? What differentiates you from your competitors? So examples of some of the key points you may have here is you may have a unique design. Your quality of your product might be superior to your competitors. You might have product customization, which your competitors don't have. You might be able to have a faster order fulfillment speed. The territory you cover might be vaster or greater than your competitors. You may be able to offer an individual personalized approach to each client. Your location might be an advantage. You may have parking, which your competitors don't have, or you may be able to offer free shipping or just compete on price. But whatever features you have that's going to make people shop with you as opposed to your competitors, you need to itemize and list here. The next section in the business plan is the finance section. This section looks at the money needed for your business for the first year. So it looks at how much money you're going to take in sales and how much you're going to pay out in expenses. So section A deals with investment and startup costs. So the costs that we're looking at here are equipment, materials / supplies, workspace, transport. So this is divided into two parts. Part one is you need to put an estimate on what you have already spent or invested in your business. So if you have any money spent in any of these items here and you're going to introduce it into the business, you will need to include it on top. So if there's a case that you have any equipment that you currently own and have paid for, and you're going to introduce that into the business, list the equipment here and put a value on it. The best way to get a value on the equipment is one of two ways. You can look at it as if you were going to sell that equipment on a social media platform, given its usage and wear and tear and its original value, how much would you reasonably expect that equipment to sell for? And whatever the amount is, put it here. Or another way of looking at it is, if you were to buy that piece of equipment secondhand on social media, given the level of wear and tear and usage of the equipment, how much would you reasonably expect to pay for it? So both answers should be the same, and put in the estimated amount there. If you have previously purchased any materials, resources, supplies, paid for subscriptions, anything of that nature, and you're going to introduce them into the business, put a value here on the materials and supplies you're introducing into the business. If you've already invested in some workspace, put the value here. If not, put in 0. And the next one is transport. So if your business requires transport to carry out some of your business activities, and you're going to introduce your own transport into the business, put down the current value of the transport, your vehicle that you're currently introducing into the business. If it's a case that your business does not require transport and you're not introducing your own transport into the business, put 0 here. So for the purpose of this example, I'm including 12,000 as the current value of my own vehicle, which I'm introducing into the business. So I add up the 3 amounts here, the 3 items that I'm introducing into the business, and that comes to 12,500. So that's the total amount of funds that I have already invested in my business. Part 2 looks at what additional investment will be required. So in addition to these amounts listed here. So once again, if there is any equipment that you plan to buy, put the amount here, and that should be backed up by an estimate or a valid estimate or a valid quotation. If you need to spend money on materials or supplies to get up and running, put in the estimated amount here, and once again, back it up with a quotation. If you need to put down a deposit or pay for rent in advance, include the amount here. If you're working from home or you don't need a premises, put 0 here. And if it's your intention to purchase transport to get your business up and running, put in the amount of the transport here, back it up by a quotation. If it's a case that you're not going to invest in transport, leave that at zero. So for the purpose of this example, my plan is to invest further 1,000 in equipment and 1,200 in material and supplies, totaling 2,200. So at this stage, you have now divided out what you've already invested and what you plan to invest in your business. So the total investment in your business is going to be whatever you have here in section A and whatever you have here in box B. So the total amount here is 14,700. That's 12,500 that I've already invested and I'm bringing into the business with me, and 2,200 that I plan to invest in order to get the business up and running. And the two amounts together come to 14,700. Part 3 now asks where you plan to get the funds that you need for this investment. So the first one here is what you have already invested. So whatever amount of money you have up here that you have already invested in the business, include that amount down below there. So in this example, 12,500 is the amount that I have already invested in the business. So that 12,500 is already invested. I now need to look at the investment that is required, which is the 2,200. So the equipment, the 1,000 euros, part of my plan is potentially or hopefully to get funding from the Enterprise Support Grant. Mayo Northeast SICAP will have already emailed you with information regarding the funding that's available or how to apply for funding on the Enterprise Support Grant. And it's recommended that you read and do your research on that funding before you complete this section here. So 1,000 euros is the required investment in my equipment, and I am hoping to secure 80% funding from the Enterprise Support Grant because that is the maximum funding that's available. And the 20%, the remaining 20%, I will need to fund from my own funds. So 1,000 euro, 80% of it is hopefully going to be funded by the Enterprise Support Grant. So that's 1,000 by 80%, which is 800. And the remaining 200 euros, I'm going to plan to finance out of future income. That would be my first year profits in the business. The 1,200 that I plan to spend on material and supplies, my intention is to also finance that out of future income. So the total amount that I plan to finance out of future income is the 200 euros for the equipment and the 1,200 euros for materials and supplies. So the total investment in my business is the 12,500 that I have already invested, the 800 that I plan to and hope to secure from the Enterprise Support Grant, and the 1,400, which is the balance of 200 for my equipment and the 1,200 for my supplies that I plan to finance out of future profits or sales in my business. So the three amounts together come to 14,700, and that relates to the information up here, the 12,500 that I've already invested and the 2,200 that I plan to invest. The two of them together come into 14,700. The next part of the finance section, part B, requires you to do a prediction or a forecast of your profit and loss for the first year of trading. So what you need to do is make a reasonable prediction of the money you expect to come into your business, which will be your sales or your income, and also the money going out of your business, which will be your costs or expenses. So part one of this section deals with your income. And this ties back to a previous section where you would have entered all your proposed selling prices. So if you look at part two under the marketing section, here you would have named or listed all your products and services, and you would have also listed your proposed selling price. So this section here will tie into you predicting your annual or forecasting your annual income. So I'm going to work with three different scenarios here with a mixture of people or businesses selling products and businesses selling service. So the first one I'm going to do is just an example of a nail technician. So under the marketing section, we would have put in a cost of each set of nails is going to cost 40 euros. So what you need to do here is predict the number of products or services you're going to deliver each week. So when you're predicting the volume, you have to also take into account your new business. So even though the nail bar in this example is going to be opening for 30 to 40 hours a week, realistically, in the early stages of business, the business owner does not expect to be operating at full capacity. So a reasonable estimate in the first year would be an average of 20 sets of nails each week until they get up and running and get more established. So if we go with 20, the weekly quantity being 20, and in this case it's sets of nails, the selling price being 40, by multiplying 20 and 40, I get a weekly income of, or weekly sales of 800 euros. I then am asked to multiply that by 48, and just because it's unlikely that an individual is going to be able to work at full capacity at 52 weeks of the year. So a fair average given holidays and time off is 48 weeks. So this will give me the annual sales or the annual income based on an average of 20 sets of nails a week at 40 euros per set. The next thing you're asked here is how much your supplies are going to be, or your cost of sales. So what this means is each set of nails, I'm going to have to provide some supplies in order to generate that sale. So how much are those supplies going to be? So if I'm doing 20 sets of nails a week for 48 weeks, that's going to be 960 sets a year. And I predict that each set is going to cost me 10 euros in actual supplies and materials. So the cost of my supplies to generate these sales are going to be 9,600. So when you take your predicted annual sales less your cost of supplies to generate these sales, it's going to give you a gross profit of 28,800. And just to note, the gross profit is the profit from providing the nail service less the cost of supplies. So the gross profit is the profit just from providing your nail services. You'll see later on in the example, other costs are going to come off, and that will bring you to your net overall profit. The next example I'm going to do here is for a floor fitting service. So I've already stated under marketing that the cost of my service is going to be 60 euros per hour. So the first part here is asking me the number of products or services that I can deliver each week. So in this scenario, I'm dealing in hours. So a reasonable estimate in the early stages of business would be 30 hours per week for the first year until I get up and running. So if it's 30 hours per week and my charge out is 60 euros per hour, my expected weekly income is going to be 1,800 euros. I then multiply that by 48 to get the annual sales or the annual income, and that's going to be 86,400. Now, as regards supplies, in this business model, the business owner is purely just selling their time or their labor. So they're not going to be buying any products in order to generate the sale. It's purely just labor, what they're selling. So the cost of sales is 0 and the gross profit is 86,400. The third example is an example of a business that sells products. So under the marketing section, I listed 2 products, a set of mugs that I propose to sell for 90 euros and a lamp that I propose to sell for 120. So what you're going to have to predict here is the number of products you expect to sell. So if you look down here under the weekly sales, my prediction is in any given week that I'm going to sell 10 sets of mugs at 90 euros and 8 lamps at 120 euros. So the total number of products I expect to sell is going to be 18. And the total sales from these products is 1,860. So if you leave the middle bit to last, you're then asked for an average price. So if I divide my predicted sales for the week, which is 1,860, by my number of products, which is 18, I get 103 euros. So this middle bit here is got by dividing 1,860, my predicted weekly sales, by the number of products, 103.80. So now that I have my predicted weekly sales of 1,860, I can multiply that by 48, and that gives me a total annual income or sales of 89,280 euros. I then need to establish the cost for each set of mugs I'm going to produce and the cost for each lamp I'm going to produce and sell. So I have researched, and it's going to cost, the cost to produce a set of mugs is 40 euros and the cost to produce a lamp is 65. So if I'm going to sell 10 lamps or 10 sets of mugs a week and the cost is 40 euros, that's going to be 400 euros. If I'm going to sell 8 lamps a week and the cost to produce a lamp is 65 euros, that's going to be 520 euros. So by adding these 2 figures together, the weekly cost to sell 10 mugs and 8 lamps is 920 euros. I then need to multiply that by 48 weeks to get an annual cost. So the annual cost is 44,160. So my predicted annual sales less my predicted annual cost gives me a gross profit of 45,120. And remember, this is just the profit from me selling mugs, less the materials it takes to create that sale. So the gross profit is the profit from purely just selling and making the mugs. All the other expenses are going to be deducted later on, and that will give me my overall net profit figure. Out of the 3 sales examples I have used in this video, I'm going to work with the pottery products example for the remainder of the video, and they're the sales figures I'm going to be using to calculate the profit and loss. The next part of the finance section requires you to estimate or predict your business overheads for the year. Now, just to clarify, overheads is just another word for your expenses, your business expenses, or your business costs. So you need to go down through each item here, each expense item here. And if it's a case that the expense or the cost is not going to be relevant to you, just make sure you put in a zero. Don't leave a blank space. So the first three items here relate to the cost of hiring staff. So if you plan to hire staff, whether it be part-time or full-time staff, in your first year of business, you need to predict the pay that you're going to pay them and include it here. If it's not in your business plan to hire in the first year, just put in 0, 0, and 0 under the first three items. So for the purpose of this demo, the business owner proposes to hire part-time staff for the full year. And remember, if you're hiring staff, while they may only be working for 48 weeks of the year, they will be entitled to holiday pay. So you're as well, just as well putting down 52 weeks. So in this business plan, the owner is going to budget on hiring part-time staff and pay them €200 a week for 52 weeks of the year, and that will include holiday time. And that comes to €10,400. No plans to hire full-time staff. And then if you hire staff, in addition to the gross pay, the employer also has to pay PRSI. So just do your research on the current PRSI rates, and a salary of 10,400 will incur PRSI of 8.8%. So that's an additional cost to the employer of €915. The next items on the business plan on the overhead section all relates to motor vehicle costs. So if it's a case that you will have no motor expenses in your business, just put 0 in all these amounts here. If you are going to require your own personal vehicle or purchase a vehicle as part of your business, you will need to estimate the costs of running that vehicle. Now, the first thing you need to do is, if it's a case that you're bringing your own vehicle or buying a vehicle, and you're going to be using it also for your own personal use, you need to decide up front what portion of the vehicle is going to be for business and what portion of the vehicle is going to be for personal use. Now, this is just a broad estimate. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm assuming that for business purposes, I'll use my vehicle 40% of the time, and 60% for personal. So that's 40% business, 60% personal. So what I need to do now is go down through each item, and I need to see, have I any car or van repayments? So €178 a month is the car repayment figure. Multiply that by 12 to get an annual figure, and then 40% of that figure relates to the business. So that's the amount I'm going to be including here under car repayments. Just as regards wear and tear, okay? Up here under the investment section of your business plan, you would have included an amount here for motor vehicles or for transport. So you're either going to be introducing your own transport into the business, or you're going to be investing in transport. So whatever the cost of your transport is, you need to estimate how many years that vehicle or that transport is going to work for you or last. So you use the figure there of 12,000 that you included, and I'm going to estimate that that vehicle is going to last me for 10 years. So that would work out of 1,200 a year for wear and tear. And once again, multiply it by 40% for my business use, and that comes to 480. So once again, it's not an exact science. It's just an estimate of how long you think the vehicle will run for you. The next item then is fuel. So in this example, I'm estimating that I will spend 80 euros, 80 euros each time I fill up with fuel, and I fill up every 2 weeks, which is 26 weeks of the year. So the annual fuel costs are 2080, and then once again, 40% of them is going to be for business. So 2080 euros multiplied by 40% comes to 832, and that's my estimate for my business fuel costs for the year. And put all your workings here into this section here. It's helpful for yourself, and it's also helpful for the person assessing your application. The next item is your insurance and tax. So just look at what insurance and tax you currently pay on your car. So 580 for insurance, 190 for tax. The two of them come to 770 euros. And once again, multiply that by 40%, your business percentage of usage, and that comes to 308 euros. The next item here is an estimate just really for your repairs and maintenance of your car, servicing, etc. So I'm putting in an estimate here of 500 euros for the year, and once again, allocating 40% of it for my business usage. So 40% of 500 is 200. The next section here is my light heat, telephone and postage. Now, if it's a case that you're renting a business property, you will need to estimate what your light and heat is and what your broadband and postage usage will be. So you can put the total amount of your rental light, heat and postage will be included here. However, if it's a case that you're not renting a premises and you're going to be using your home partly for business purposes, for administration, for doing your advertising campaigns, etc., what you need to do, a little bit like the motor, is estimate how much of your annual light and heat and telephone and broadband bill will you allocate for business and how much will be for personal. So once again, it's only an estimate. It's not an exact calculation. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to estimate that 30% of my annual light, heat and telephone bill will be for business, and the remaining 70% will be for personal use. So the best thing to do maybe is just look at your bills for the last year and come up with the total amount. So the total light and heat amount, and for the purpose of this video, I'm calculating it at 1,000 euros was my total annual bill. And also look at your home broadband bills and your mobile bills and add them up for the whole year. So for the purpose of this video, I'm putting in 600 euros. Add the two amounts together, which come to 1,600, and then multiply that by whatever percentage you have decided is for business. So in this case, it's 30%, and that comes to 480 euros. The next item here is the hire or lease of any equipment. So if you are hiring or leasing equipment, put in the monthly or the weekly fee here. And in this case, I've put in 120 euros per month, and I'm multiplying it by 12, which will give me an annual figure of 1,440. So if you intend to lease or hire, do your research, and whatever figure you are quoted, put it in here. If this is not an expense you're going to incur, just put in 0. The next item is rent and rates. So if it's a case that you are renting a premises, you will put in the monthly rent here and multiply it by 12 to get an annual figure, and also research how much the rates are going to cost you. Add the two amounts together, put them in here. But for the purpose of this video, I'm putting in 0. If it's a case that you have any disposable items, so example of disposable items would be plastic cups, plates, straws, napkins, blades, drill bits, etc., nail files. anything of that nature that you're buying, using, and then disposing of. Work out an estimate of what you feel they're going to be for the year and put the amount in here. The next item is advertising and marketing. So you need to have an advertising budget in your head, how much you're going to spend every week, how much a month, whether it be social media, what type of advertising you're going to work with. But whatever your budget is, put in your annual budgeted figure here. If it's a case that you have other insurances like public liability, product liability, you need business indemnity insurance, get a quotation, and whatever figure is on the quotation, put the annual amount in here. So for this video, I'm putting in 0 as none of them are applicable. The next item is office supplies. Work out what your budget is going to be for office supplies, things like ink, copier paper, folders, envelopes, etc. And whatever your annual budget is, put the amount in here. If you're going to hire an accountant to prepare your accounts, or if you need solicitors, get a quote from an accountant or a solicitor of what their costs are going to be and put the amount in here. The next one is interest and bank charges. If it's a case that you have free banking, I know that some banks offer free banking for new business owners, just put 0 in here. If not, estimate what your bank fees are, and they're generally calculated per quarter. So I'm estimating that they're 25 euros per quarter, which will be 100 euros. The next item here is equipment wear and tear. So once again, if you scroll back up here to the section of the business plan, the startup costs, you would have put in an amount here for equipment that you may be purchasing or equipment that you're introducing into the business. In this example, 400 euros of equipment has been introduced into the business and 100 is planned future purchase. So the two amounts together come to 1,400 euros. So the 1,400 euros is my equipment, but it's asking me for the wear and tear on it. So just like the motor vehicles, I need to estimate how long I expect that equipment to last. So I'm going to estimate that the equipment is going to last 5 years. So the wear and tear, by getting 1,400 and dividing it by 5, the wear and tear is going to be 280 euros per year. Now, the last item here is your overheads. If it's a case that you expect to have other expenses that haven't been itemized up above, they will go into this section here of other overheads. So anything you have, just include a description here, and once again, estimate an annual amount. So in this example, if I'm including some subscriptions, professional subscriptions I have, and also some IT subscriptions, like you might have virus software or antivirus protection, an annual subscription for that, Microsoft Office subscription, a Zoom subscription, accounting software subscription, anything of that nature, or any other items you may think of. List them here and put in the total amount here. And remember, these columns here can be expandable by scrolling down, and you can put in as much writing there as you need to. So the next step, once you've itemized all your overheads or costs for the year, your predicted costs, add them all up and they come to 17,529. So at this stage now, the income has been estimated for the business, the sales has been estimated, the cost of sales has been estimated, the materials, and also my other expenses. So I'm now ready to put these pieces of information together to get my overall profit or loss for the first year in business. Okay, so I move on to the next section and it's asking for the gross profit, which is F. So if I go back up here to where I estimated my sales. There's my estimated sales for the year, my direct costs to arrive at those sales, and the difference between the two of them is my gross profit. So that figure there under F is taken and included down here as the gross profit. The total overheads that I've just calculated here, what 17,529, whatever that figure is included here. And the difference between the two is my projected overall profit or loss for the first year of trading. So in this example here, my projected profit is 27,591 euros. So the last section here under the finance section deals with the personal income or drawings. So drawings is the money that the owner will take out of their business for their own personal use. So the owner's income or the owner's drawings or the money the business owner takes out of the business for their own personal use is not included up here in overheads, as it is not treated as a business expense. Generally, what the owner of the business does is look at their profit and sees how much can I afford to take out, and you live off that amount. So the first question it's asking you to hear is to predict how much money or how much personal income do you need each week. So that's your the total income you need. So for this example, I'm putting in 700 euros as the personal income I need to survive each week. The next thing you're asked to do is to subtract any social welfare payment from that amount. So the amount of social welfare I have is 232 euros. So the difference between the 700 and the 232 is 468. So effectively, if I need 700 euros to each week as personal income, and I'm already receiving 232 in social welfare, the difference between the two, the 468, needs to come from my business. So then the next thing is I multiply the 468 by 52, and that gives me an annual drawings figure of 24,336. So that's the amount of money I will need to take out of my business each year, or in the first year. So 468 multiplied by 52. Okay. So now I need to look at my profit and see how will my business make sufficient profit, or so in this case there is sufficient profit there. My projected profit will be enough to cover my expected drawings or my expected income each week. If it's a case that you come to this figure here and you don't have enough profit in your business to cover it, you may need to relook at your business plan. It may be that your business will not be viable, that you don't have enough money to cover your expenses. You may need to source other income in the first year to cover your personal income. You may need to look at maybe a loan or some other source of income. Or the other thing you might just need to do is lower your personal, live off less money each week. So lower the amount of your personal income. So this information here is really telling when it comes to the financial viability of your business plan. So just to conclude, in this example here, my projected profit is 27,591. The money I expect or hope to get out of the business is 24,336. So this is viable financially, and the rest of my profit can be plowed back into my business to help it grow further. The final section in the business plan is the production section. The first question in this section asks where you will operate your business from. So if it's a case that you're going to operate your business from home, include home here. If it's a case that you have a business premise, write business premises here and include the address of the premises. The next question asks, are there any modifications required for the premises? If the answer is no, include no here. If the answer is yes, write yes and give an explanation of the modifications that are required for the premise. Which of the following licenses or permits do you require to operate the business? So in this section, it lists 9 different licenses and permits. Read through them all carefully and put a tick beside the ones that are relevant for your business. If it's a case that you can't actually tick into the box, just put your cursor here before the box and indicate it with an X. So in this example, the licenses that are required are the driving license, a professional certificate, and insurance. The next question asks, do you hold the necessary certs, qualifications, and permissions to run the business? So the answer to this is yes. And once again, if you can't tick into the box, put your cursor beside it and include an X. The next question in this section asks, is there anything that your proposed business needs that the enterprise support grant may be able to fund? So you should familiarize yourself with the funding that is available under the enterprise support grant. And it gives funding for items such as equipment, premises, material, transport, supplies, and any other expenses. So if it's a case that you do plan to apply for that particular funding, list the items here that you intend to apply for the grant or the funding for. But just remember here that these figures you include here, so in this example here, there's 2 figures included for equipment that come to €1,000. Just make sure that they correspond with the figures that you have included in the investment and startup costs section of this plan. So this is the investment and startup section of the plan, and you can see here that in the example here, €1,000 was included as what was needed for additional equipment. And that equipment is itemized down below under the ESG section. If you intend to apply for the grant for materials, workspace, or transport, just make sure that the amounts here correspond with the information below. And any items you include here, just make sure to attach a quotation that corresponds with the items and send it with this application. The final question in this section is, do you think you will require additional staff in the future? So the answer to that is either yes or no. So now the business plan is completed and it needs to be signed by the applicant in 2 parts. So the first signature here is the applicant's declaration, and this is where you agree that the information regarding your back to work enterprise allowance or your short-term enterprise allowance application can be transferred between the Department of Social Protection and the local development company. So if you're in agreement, you can sign here and a digital signature can be included here. And you also need to include a date and just make sure that it's the date that you're submitting the final draft of your business plan. So that's the first signature. And if you scroll down below, you need to read this information here carefully, the disclaimer. And it is just advising you that the information provided by Mayo Northeast in relation to the Back to Work Enterprise allowances does not constitute legal or accounting advice. It's just merely providing you with general information and support regarding your business startup. If it's a case that you do need legal or financial advice, you are advised to contact and engaged with a licensed solicitor, an accountant, or a financial advisor. And finally, you're also being advised that the applicant or the potential new business owner is responsible for all the tax affairs and the business operations. So if you're in agreement, sign here, and once again, a digital signature can be used, and the date here needs to be the date of the final submission of the final draft of your business plan, and print your name here. The form is then going to be signed by the Intrio officer and dated here. Just to advise you that there is additional information here below if you want to have a read through before you submit your business plan. I would like to conclude by reminding you that this tutorial is the copyright of Mayo Northeast SICAP. It is strictly for the use of the Back to Work Enterprise Allowance or Short-Term Enterprise Allowance Scheme applicants referred to Mayo Northeast SICAP by Intrio.